Oh, that's very important. Absolutely. Good afternoon. We will commence. We will, Commissioner Clark, we've got a place for you right here. My name is Cesar Perales. I introduced myself at the beginning of each of our public meetings. I have the honor of chairing the 2018 New York City Charter Revision Commission. As always, I will begin by asking the commissioners to introduce themselves, and I will start on my left. Sharon?
Good afternoon. I'm Sharon Greenberger. I'm the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater New York.
Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Bryant, Secretary Treasurer of SEIU 32BJ Property Service Union across the East Coast with 170,000 members. Thank you.
Good afternoon, John Siegel. I'm an attorney in private practice in Manhattan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carlos Chasura. I'm the president and CEO of the New York Building Companies.
Let me just tell them that I was a former Secretary of State and a former Deputy Mayor of New York City. And as I said before, my name is Cesar Perales.
Hello, my name is Wendy Weiser, and I direct the Democracy Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU Law School.
Good afternoon, I'm Una Clark. I'm a former member of the New York City Council and a trustee for the City University of New York.
Good afternoon, my name is Marco Carrion. I currently serve as Commissioner of the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit.
Good afternoon. My name is Aneta Citron, and I'm the Executive Director of Chaya Community Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, I'm Larry Angelo. I'm a longtime budget person in the City of New York and currently a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for State and Local Government.
The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the progress that we've made and to vote on a resolution that's going to direct our staff to prepare legislation, ballot language, and a final report that will reflect our work. The resolution has been sent to all of the commissioners in advance of the meeting. I'm sure they've all read it. The resolution has been posted on the website, so the public has notice of it. And the resolution reflects extensive public engagement, stakeholder meetings, and research by our staff. I will now ask our Executive Director, Matt Gawal, to give some background on the rationales behind the proposals that are embodied in the resolution. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin with a campaign finance proposal. This commission heard testimony that the city's campaign finance system is successful and considered to be a nationwide model. Nonetheless, the commission also heard from members of the public and elected officials that there remains a public perception that government officials grant improper favors to large campaign donors, and that the existence of the largest campaign contribution still permitted under our campaign finance system helps to feed that perception of corruption. The campaign finance proposal, as described in today's proposed resolution, attempts to address this perception of corruption by significantly lowering the limits for campaign contributions to candidates, both for candidates who choose to participate in the public finance program and those who do not. At the same time, the proposed limits are designed to be high enough to still enable candidates to raise the funds they need to communicate effectively with voters and run competitive campaigns, whether or not they participate in the voluntary public financing program. The proposed new limits for participating candidates are somewhat lower than for non-participants, because participants are able to supplement private contributions with public matching funds. The campaign finance proposal in today's resolution also serves anti-corruption goals by strengthening the small dollar matching funds formula and increasing the cap on public funds available to participating candidates. Increased small dollar matching further enables participating candidates to campaign without the need to rely on the largest donors. At the same time, strengthening the matching formula and raising the public funds cap helps to maintain incentives for candidate participation in the public financing program by maintaining a reasonable yet appealing balance between the benefits of participation and its burdens. On civic engagement. On the topic of civic engagement, we heard a strong interest in creating a vehicle to enshrine the values of civic participation in the charter without increasing bureaucracy. To do this, the resolution calls for establishment of a civic engagement commission. To address concerns raised by the public and many of you, the commissioners, we thought it was important to incorporate a mix of mayoral and non-mayoral appointments on the commission. The commission will provide a landing pad for several new and exciting initiatives that were suggested in our public comment process, such as participatory budgeting, increased resources to community boards, and greater language assistance services. It will also allow the public to better access the city's existing civic engagement efforts and support and partner with community-based organizations, institutions, and civic leaders in the public and private sectors in their civic work. On community boards. Throughout our public engagement process, we heard a strong interest in making community boards more reflective of the communities they represent and more effective in representing those communities. To address these concerns, the resolution would impose a limit of 4 consecutive 2-year terms for community board members with staggered implementation and the ability to be reappointed after sitting out 1 2-year term. An 8-year limit on community board members provides parity with the term limits for many of the city's elected officials and strikes an appropriate balance between creating opportunities for new membership and allowing time for members to develop and share their institutional knowledge. The resolution also calls for uniformity in the application process and requires borough presidents to report on information relating to recruitment and selection, which will promote transparency without disrupting the important role that borough presidents play. Finally, as I mentioned, we think that the Civic Engagement Commission can play a useful role in providing needed resources to community boards. On language access, we heard public testimony that improving language access services is vital to ensuring all New Yorkers can fully participate in the city's civic life. To address this issue, the resolution gives an affirmative mandate to the Civic Engagement Commission to provide language assistance services, including providing interpreters at poll sites. We think the structure and overall mission of the Civic Engagement Commission will make it well suited for the role. On ranked choice voting. Regarding ranked choice voting, the Commission heard several comments regarding the proposed benefits of adopting ranked choice voting. We heard that it would make elections more efficient, avoid us having to hold separate runoff election, build consensus, and make candidates more likely to reach out to a broader set of voters. However, as staff has been studying this issue, we learned that ranked choice voting has not been adopted uniformly. There are multiple models that would need to be examined for the effects specific to New York City. Additionally, more follow-up will be done regarding the jurisdictions that adopted ranked choice voting and then repealed it. We also recommend further study on whether ranked choice voting would have effects on minority communities or vulnerable populations. For these reasons, the resolution proposed directs the staff in the final report to express the Commission's desire to have a future commission engage in a careful additional study of ranked choice voting to determine whether and how it should be implemented in the city. On the matter of districting, we heard a wide variety of comments suggesting the need to reform the city's redistricting system and make it more fair and independent. We received some comments suggesting that the Commission adopt reforms from California and other jurisdictions. However, given New York City's unique size and diversity, it is necessary to evaluate any proposed reform for impact specific to the city. It's also important to allow sufficient time for public input on any specific change to the system, including input from communities of color, elected officials, political parties, former members of districting commissions, and other experts. For these reasons, the proposed resolution in front of you directs the staff in the final report to express the Commission's desire to have a future commission take up districting reform. Mr. Chair, I think you would now like me to read the resolution.
Am I to read the resolution?
I'm to read the resolution to you and the commission members.
Oh, okay.
So I'll take a sip of water and move quickly.
The stenographer is working as hard as possible. Their fingers are flying.
2018 Charter Revision Commission Resolution, August 14th, 2018. Whereas the 2018 New York City Charter Revision Commission has conducted extensive public outreach, including holding numerous public hearings and events in all 5 boroughs of the city. And whereas the Commission has heard and received written testimony from elected officials and members of the public at these hearings and events, including from the representatives of public interest and advocacy organizations, civic and community organizations, political organizations, and private citizens. And whereas, in addition, the Commission has encouraged public comment through a variety of methods and in multiple languages, including at community-based events on its website and through various forms of social media. And whereas commission staff has also solicited comments and ideas from heads of city departments and their personnel. And whereas the commission has reviewed the entire charter as part of this revision process. And whereas the staff prepared a preliminary staff report recommending that the commission continue to study proposals related to campaign finance reform, election reform, civic engagement, community boards, and redistricting, and campaign finance. Whereas commenters expressed serious concern that large campaign donations result in quid pro quo corruption and the appearance of such corruption, proposed numerous ways that the city's campaign finance system could be strengthened to combat such corruption as well as its appearance. And whereas to address these concerns, many commenters, including experts, election officials, and members of the public, suggested reforms to certain core elements of the campaign finance system, including reducing contribution limits and strengthening public financing through adjustments to the matching formula and the cap on public matching funds. And whereas certain commenters also expressed concern regarding the timing of the disbursement of public matching funds of the current system, now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Charter Revision Commission hereby directs the staff to prepare a proposal or a portion of a proposal to be placed before the voters at the general election to be held on November 6, 2018, if adopted by the commission, consistent with the following. Decrease contribution limits for candidates who choose to participate in the public financing program to $2,000 for citywide offices, $1,500 for borough president offices, and $1,000 for council member offices per election cycle. Decrease contribution limits for non-participating candidates to $3,500 for citywide offices, $2,500 for borough president offices, and $1,500 for council member offices per election cycle. Change the formula for determining public matching funds to a ratio of 8:1 in public funds matched on the first $250 of eligible contributions for citywide offices, and to a ratio of 8:1 in public funds matched on the first $175 of eligible contributions for borough president and council member offices. Increase the cap on public matching funds per candidate and per election to 75% of the expenditure limit for the relevant office, and make public funds available to qualifying candidates earlier in the election year. Civic engagement. Whereas, in its public testimony, the public expressed a broad concern about the state of civic engagement in the city, and whereas the city's current efforts to promote engagement of its residents are many and varied, and public commenters express an interest in creating a vehicle to coordinate and enhance the city's current efforts and better inform the public about opportunities for engagement. And whereas the commission has determined that establishment of a civic engagement commission would enshrine the values of civic participation into the charter and provide opportunities for new and innovative programs. And whereas the commission received compelling testimony regarding the value of fostering civic engagement through the establishment of a citywide participatory budgeting program. And whereas the commission received compelling testimony that providing residents with information regarding the location of poll sites, changes in poll site location, voter registration, and other forms of voter engagement are central to promoting participation in civic life. And whereas the administration has established the Democracy NYC initiative for the purposes of strengthening democracy, making voting more accessible, and breaking down barriers to civic participation, which signals the city's commitment to take further governmental action in this area. And whereas the city desires to develop and support new and existing programs and other initiatives to encourage meaningful participation in civic life, now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Charter Revision Commission hereby directs that the staff prepare a proposal or portion of a proposal to be placed before the voters at the general election to be held on November 6, 2018, if adopted by the commission, consistent with the following. Establish a civic engagement commission with an appointment structure that includes mayoral and non-mayoral appointments and other representation, which may include the heads of relevant city agencies. Establish that the Civic Engagement Commission shall set policies in furtherance of its mission to promote civic participation and engagement by residents of New York City. Provide that the Civic Engagement Commission shall be responsible for the following functions: oversight and implementation of a citywide participatory budgeting program subject to appropriation and consistent with other applicable laws and procedures, providing technical assistance services, including urban planning and other resources to community boards as set forth in the community boards portion of this resolution, coordinating existing civic engagement efforts by city agencies, supporting and partnering with community-based organizations, institutions, and civic leaders in the public and private sectors in their civic engagement efforts, which may include, among other things, leadership skills development, stewardship of public spaces, youth engagement, and targeted services to immigrant or other vulnerable communities, taking action to encourage, promote, and facilitate voter registration and voting, including but not limited to targeted outreach to groups that are underrepresented among those registered and those voting, including eligible voters who are limited in English proficiency, and performing language access functions as set forth in the language access portion of the resolution. Getting there. Community boards. Whereas members of the public, experts, and elected officials have expressed a strong interest in making the city's community boards more reflective of the communities they represent, and more effective in representing those communities. And whereas many commenters expressed the view that community boards, which serve an important role in New York City's local democracy, would be strengthened by enhanced diversity, and several of such commenters have proposed imposition of term limits as a means to achieve this goal. And whereas many commenters expressed the view that the appointment process for community boards could be enhanced by steps to provide a consistency among the 5 boroughs, and whereas the commission heard compelling testimony that there is a need for increased technical assistance services, including urban planning and other resources, to better enable community boards to fulfill their charter mandate, now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Charter Revision Commission hereby directs that the staff prepare a proposal or portion of a proposal to be placed before the voters at the general election to be held on November 6, 2018, if adopted by the commission, consistent with the following. Term limits. Provide a limit of 4 consecutive full 2-year terms for community board members, provided, however, that for purposes of staggered implementation, certain initial appointments may include a limit of 5 2-year terms. Establish that the 4-year term limit would become effective for appointments or reappointments beginning on or after April 1st, 2019, and establish that community board members who had previously served for 4 consecutive terms are not barred from reappointment after 1 full term out of office. Appointment process. Require all borough presidents to publish an annual report disclosing the number of open community board positions, information about current community board members, the borough president's recruitment methods, the evaluation criteria followed in the selection process, and any specific methods employed by such borough president. And set forth in the charter uniform categories of information that must be included in all applications, and require all borough presidents to make an application for community board member positions available online. Resources and related matters. Require the Civic Engagement Commission to provide technical assistance services, including urban planning and other resources, including but not limited to language assistance services to community boards, and require community boards with assistance from the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications to maintain a website. Language access. Whereas approximately 23% of all New Yorkers are limited English proficient, meaning that they have a limited ability to read, speak, and write in English, and whereas the city continues to grow its efforts to fully engage its diverse and multilingual communities, expanding language access is crucial to building a more just and equitable city, and these efforts are particularly critical as they relate to voting. And whereas the commission heard compelling testimony that there is a greater need for language assistance services relating to voting and voter registration, now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Charter Revision Commission hereby directs that the staff prepare a proposal or report or portion of a proposal to be placed before the voters at the general election to be held on November 6, 2018, if adopted by the commission, consistent with the following. Require the Civic Engagement Commission to consider the needs of language communities in developing its programs and services, and seek to ensure that the commission's programs and services are accessible to limited English proficient New Yorkers. Require the Civic Engagement Commission, in coordination with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, to develop a plan for providing voter education assistance and outreach services in languages other than English to individuals who are eligible or may become eligible to vote, and require the Civic Engagement Commission to develop, in coordination with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, a plan to provide interpreters at poll sites throughout the city, which shall include but not be limited to a methodology for determining which languages and poll sites shall be covered under such program, including a requirement to periodically review and adapt such methodology as appropriate in response to the needs of language communities. Require designation of an individual to coordinate language access services provided by the Civic Engagement Commission, and a process to monitor and timely respond to public complaints. And require the Civic Engagement Commission to track and report the provision of language assistance services, including the number of voters that utilized interpreters at poll sites. Ranked choice voting. Whereas the commission received public comments from experts, elected officials, advocacy groups, and members of the public proposing that the city adopt ranked choice voting in municipal elections. And whereas many commenters suggested that the adoption of ranked choice voting would have potential benefits for the administration of municipal elections, including broader voter engagement and participation, reduction of negative campaigning, consensus building, providing voters with more opportunities to select preferences among candidates, and the administrative efficiency of eliminating the need for separate runoff elections. And whereas based on available research, ranked choice voting is not implemented uniformly among the jurisdictions that have adopted it, with variations ranging from the number of candidates voters may rank to the composition of the ballot, and some jurisdictions have abandoned the use of ranked choice voting after its adoption. And whereas based on available research, there are significant open questions regarding the impact that such a change would have on voters and candidates, including questions regarding the impacts on minority voters and vulnerable populations. And whereas based on available research, there are significant open questions regarding the operational feasibility of implementing ranked choice voting in a city on the scale of New York, including questions regarding vote tabulation timeframes and auditing procedures. Now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Charter Revision Commission directs the staff to carefully address this promising approach to improving the administration of municipal elections in the commission's final report, with a recommendation that such proposal be considered by a future Charter Revision Commission or other legislative body. And last page, the districting process. Whereas the commission received many public comments proposing that the commission propose changes to the districting process. And whereas the commission heard compelling testimony that a fair and independent districting process is critical to a well-functioning local democracy. And whereas several commenters expressed concern that the districting process be amended to ensure that due consideration be given to the voting power of racial and ethnic minority groups. And whereas other commenters suggested changes to the appointment process and other changes to districting requirements designed to make the districting commission more independent. And whereas the overall variety of the comments submitted to the commission has demonstrated that there are many ways to approach redistricting reform. And whereas New York is unique in its size and diversity, any proposed reform that looks to the models of other jurisdictions must be evaluated for impact specific to New York City and its local communities. And whereas input from local communities, including communities of color, elected officials, political parties, former members of districting commissions, experts, and other important stakeholders is necessary to evaluate any proposed reform to the city's districting process. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the New York City Charter Revision Commission directs the staff to carefully address the variety of redistricting reforms presented to the commission and the commission's final report, with the recommendation that redistricting reform be considered by a future Charter Revision Commission. And be it further resolved that the New York City Charter Revision Commission directs the staff to prepare a final report and ballot questions and abstracts consistent with the foregoing directives and with such further amendments as may be deemed necessary and appropriate by the chair with notice to the commissioners, and provided further that such final report and ballot questions and abstracts cumulatively reflecting the commission's proposals shall be submitted to the commission for consideration of whether to place such proposals before the voters at the general election to be held on November 6th, 2018.
Thank you, Matt. That was well read. Speed reading. We may need some more speed reading because I had a special request from our vice chair, Rachel Gossett, who cannot be with us for very important reasons, personal reasons. And she asked that I read a statement into the record. If you are not present, this is not a vote. You cannot vote. So I'm reading just her sentiments that she wanted to read to all of you. It has and continues to be an honor to serve as vice chair of the New York City Charter Revision Commission. I deeply regret being unable to participate in today's meeting, and I appreciate the opportunity of having my statement read. I'm skipping much of it, in which it deals with how pleased she was by the process we undertook and the time and care of our commissioners. She begins with civic engagement, a specific proposal. Civic engagement, broadly speaking, is an issue that garnered a great deal of interest, both at public hearings and from experts. We all undeniably believe that greater civic engagement will serve our city. The question was how to be constructive on this front. I am pleased that New Yorkers will have the opportunity to vote to create a civic engagement commission. This innovative and streamlined approach will marshal the city's civic engagement efforts to produce improved outcomes and cut down on currently uncoordinated activities. Of particular significance is in my view, is the opportunity for all communities to participate in community budgeting, where communities have a chance to decide how to spend capital dollars. And hosting the needed community board and language access resources in such an office will ensure communities are able to access expert assistance. We also heard loud and clear that New Yorkers fear that our political system is afflicted by the corrupting nature of money in politics. The distress engendered by worry about money mattering more than people is why we must take bold steps in reforming campaign financing. I think our proposal will achieve the aim of creating incentives for candidates to reach out widely and to know they don't have to be dependent on a few. While our proposal will require a modest increase in funding from the public, these dollars will serve the critical function of allowing voters to have greater faith in the system. Ranked choice voting and districting reforms emerged from the borough hearings from New Yorkers. I believe this speaks to the city's residents' thirst for innovation. Like many, I am intrigued by the potential ranked choice voting. The potential ranked choice voting has for broadening voter engagement and participation and for reducing negative campaigning. Yet I am sorry to conclude that there are significant policy, legal, and operational issues that we as a body have not had the opportunity and time to tackle. I agree that the best course of action will be to explore these open questions and considerations in our final report so that a future Charter Revision Commission can thoroughly investigate and overcome these barriers to implementing what could be a game changer in the way New Yorkers select their representatives. Same concept holds for districting process. I believe there's close to unanimous agreement among the commission members and the public that the current districting process is not sufficient to serve New York as well. The goal should be to create a mechanism for districting that assures the public that district lines are drawn fairly, proportionally, and reflective of the community. Only when the districting process achieves these goals will the process have the public's trust. I look forward to talking with everyone soon and to our final vote on the ballot language legislation and the final report. So I apologize for all of the reading, but this latter one was a special request by the vice chair that has worked very hard on this commission. I'll now, unlike what we've done in the past, wait for people to raise their hands. I'm going to go down the line, see if everybody's got something to say. I hope you'll be brief. But one of the reasons I like brevity is that one of our members, Kyle Bragg, must leave in just a very few minutes. How many minutes do you think you've got, Kyle?
I'm sorry,
How many minutes do you think you have?
I have about another 20 minutes.
We'll see if we can go down. We'll try, Kyle. We're not going to cut off anybody's sense of what they need to say. Why don't we start on this end, Larry? Why don't we start?
Well, I'd like to commend the work of the staff on attending meetings, hearing from the public, synthesizing what they were saying, and presenting what I think are very good proposals to the commission, and hopefully will be good proposals on the ballot. I agree with the staff in that ranked choice voting, although interesting, is something the city has no experience with. And while the research indicates it may reduce the negative campaigning that goes on, while it may encourage elected officials to reach out beyond their traditional base, there are other experts who said it may in fact limit people's choices. So given the fact that we don't have experience with it, I support the staff's resolution to put this off, let another commission take the time that this commission does not have to study the issue.
Thank you, Larry. Another?
Yes, I'll just quickly add my appreciation to the staff for their hard work over the last several months and for really performing an incredible Herculean task in, as Larian said, synthesizing such a wide array of proposals and ideas that were put forth. I personally feel very pleased with the process. I'm very comfortable with what we are proposing today. I do regret that we did not have enough opportunity to really come up with a proposal around the districting process, as I feel very strongly about that matter, as well as other issues that didn't make it to the fore in addition to ranked choice voting. So thank you.
Marcos?
Thank you. I'd like to commend the staff as well. This has really been a yeoman effort to put this document together. So I'd like to agree with that unfortunately we could not dig deeper on redistricting, because I think that is something that future charter commission should look at. But I think what we've come up with both on the community board side, using transparency to attract more members and to increase resources to real vital entity is important. And also on campaign finance, answering the concerns that we've heard regarding money in politics is really fantastic work. So thank you.
Dale?
And I didn't have an opportunity to introduce myself earlier because I walked in a little bit late, for which I apologize. My name is Dale Ho. I'm a lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union. It's been an honor to serve on this commission, and I just want to thank Chairman Morales, my fellow commissioners, and the staff for all of their hard work in producing the resolution for today. I know it wasn't easy given the amount of time that we had. I think the resolution includes some strong proposals for increasing civic participation and increasing government responsiveness. I'm sure not everyone will agree on the actual content of resolutions that emerge in each of these areas, but I'm hopeful that we can all agree that the people of New York City deserve an opportunity to vote yes or no on those proposals. I do want to add one other point, and I just want to make clear that it's not in any way a criticism of the staff, which worked really, really hard, and my fellow commissioners who I know are deeply invested in this city and in our democracy. It's, I think, just a reflection of our extremely truncated process, because in addition to the proposals that will, in addition to the language that will eventually emerge from this resolution on these particular areas, I think there are other matters on which the people of New York City deserve an opportunity to weigh in, and I think it's unfortunate that they won't be able to do so. We heard a wide variety of concerns that were raised in our community hearings, everything from how the Civilian Complaint Review Board is constituted to whether or not the city should adopt the Convention Against the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And I just want to thank the public for bringing these issues to our attention. There are two issues in particular that are particularly germane to this commission, and I think it's disappointing that we were unable to make sufficient progress on those issues in the time that we had to put forth specific language for voters to consider. The first is in redistricting. We heard repeated concerns at some of our hearings that members of the community think that our current redistricting process is not sufficiently independent, it's not sufficiently fair, does not take into account the needs of communities of color adequately. The challenge for us was that I don't think we received proposals with sufficient specificity in time to get feedback from experts and stakeholders to sufficiently consider those proposals. And so, for example, we received one very, I think, strong proposal from Common Cause and the Brennan Center for Justice, which I think would increase transparency, increase the independence of the redistricting process, and establish heightened protections for communities of color. I'm sorry that there isn't more time for us to analyze that proposal and get feedback from the from members of the community and stakeholders on it, but I'm hopeful that that proposal will form the basis for future conversations on redistricting reform. There is time for that. The next election to take place under new districts won't be until 2023, and I'm very, very hopeful that at some point in the next 5 years we can get something done. The other area in which I'm disappointed that we don't have language to propose to New York City voters on is ranked choice voting. I heard during our hearings what sounded like a widespread desire to adopt some form of ranked choice voting for at least some of our elections. And I felt, at least with respect to this issue, that we did have, compared to, say, the redistricting issue, time to hear testimony about the practical effects of particular forms of ranked choice voting. But again, the process was quite truncated, and I am hopeful that we, as a city, together will have opportunities to consider some form of ranked choice voting in the future. None of that, I think, is meant to take away from the very serious proposals that will be on the ballot in November to strengthen our campaign finance system, create a civic engagement commission, reform community boards, and enhance language access protections at the polls. And again, I'm very thankful for the staff for putting together what I think is very strong work on those issues.
Una?
Thank you so very much. I would like to re-echo some of what my colleagues have said, but having been an elected official myself and knowing what voters do on election day, is if you put too many proposals on the ballot, they pick one and nothing else happens. And I think that our choice, the staff was very thorough in the work that they do, and we are proposing those that we think we can educate the community about, especially civic engagement. So I would strongly support the work and the proposals that we have for the election in November. And while we ask other commissions who will come after us to take a deep dive in some of the issues that came before us, for which we did not have enough time to even consider at this point. I want to thank the chairman and all of my colleagues who've worked as hard as they could, and for the staff in particular, who kept us abreast of all of the issues and all of the information that came in that we didn't hear, that they saw online, that they got in calls, and that they got from testimony. So I want to just thank all of our community, the New Yorkers who've made it their choice to be at the hearings, to hear and know that we are open and transparent, and that we're going to be putting on the ballot those things that are near and dear to New Yorkers based on the all of the testimonies that we heard.
Wendy?
Thank you very much. I am going to be somewhat duplicative and repetitive of what some of my colleagues said. I do want to start by thanking my colleagues and the chair for their incredible service and commitment and work on this. And then I want to give special thanks to what I think was a really incredible and terrific staff that was able to do a tremendous amount of work, synthesis, analysis, and present it to us and to all of you in what is a remarkably short period of time. And it's remarkable how much we were able to accomplish in that time period. I think that it is terrific that New Yorkers will have the opportunity to vote on these proposals that are designed to enhance and increase civic engagement, improve our democracy, something I care deeply about and that we all care deeply about. I want to thank people in this room and the other people who have come and testified before this commission. The work is not finished here, and I'm going to just mention that before the few other things I want to say of the work left to do, there is the work of drafting these proposals and along with some tweaks that may be necessary to make it work. But I think that that is the going to be important work to get this before the voters. And I want to thank the staff in advance for that and look forward to working on those. And I do want to reiterate what some of my colleagues mentioned, some of the unfinished business. I want to especially emphasize the redistricting process. And I want to thank the staff for including in here a very strong recommendation that this proposal be taken up by a future commission. I think that there is strong consensus, and I am deeply persuaded that New York would benefit by making the redistricting, reforming the redistricting process to make it more independent and more responsive to communities. I think that I am disappointed that we weren't able to finish that job, and I look forward to that being taken up at the next time. I think this is deeply important for New York, and we have time to do that before the next redistricting cycle, and I strongly urge the city to do so and the next commission to take that on. And I also want to say that I too was disappointed that we were not able to get over the finish line on ranked choice voting. I think we did a lot of great work, and I think that the work that is going to be reflected in the final report will be a helpful guide forward so that the next commission can finish what we were unable to finish this time around. But again, this is a tremendous piece of work and hopefully a great benefit to our city.
Given, in the interest of time, I will not make much of a statement except to reinforce the comments made by my fellow commissioners about this staff. They have done yeoman's work. It's been incredible. I know perhaps more than any of you how diligent they have been. So I thank them. I think that what they've produced today is extraordinary, given the amount of time. And I, of course, enthusiastically support it. So, but let me move on.
Thank you. Why don't we give the staff a round of applause? I think they deserve it. Good job, everybody. First of all, thank you to the chairman. You've done a great job. We came together rather quickly, and we had a short period of time to answer a lot of questions. But to my fellow commissioners, it was great to get to know you a little bit during this process. And I hope that we continue to work together to make New York City an even better place. So I have a couple of concerns with the resolution. And I think my biggest concern, without getting into really specifics of each proposal, because I think most of them are great and I would support them. Unfortunately, I will have to vote no on the current resolution because I believe that it is important that each commissioner be given the opportunity to vote yes or no on each specific proposal in the resolution, the way the voters will get the opportunity to vote for that in November. So should that change from now till the final meeting, I will be happy to vote yes on most of the proposals. But given that we are being asked to vote on one proposal in its entirety, and given that I have some concerns on the campaign finance numbers, although I agree that we should limit contributions and make them lower, and most of the reasoning behind that proposal, I do have concerns with the dollar amounts, and I do worry of a bad economy coming up in the future and adding additional burdens on New York City taxpayers. And then my second concern would be on the Office of Civic Engagement. I would like to see that flushed out a little bit more, because I think it is a valuable idea and a great tool moving forward. But I think it's important that, particularly for community boards, that they have an understanding of they have to work with the borough president's office, they work with CAU, and now we're giving them another layer of bureaucracy that is being given to them. So I think if we can flush these things out in the next week, and I really stress again that I hope we have an opportunity to vote for each question individually the way the voters will. But having said that, I will say one thing that I am very excited about, is that this commission really has looked at community boards and really focused on doing some good for them. And I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Rather than echoing the prior comments about the process and the staff, I want to say three specific things. The first regarding you, Mr. Chairman, who I had never met before this commission. And I realized very early on that if I could learn from you a fraction of the patience and the graciousness that you have exhibited throughout this process, to the commissioners, to the staff, to the public, if I could master a fraction of that, I'd be a much more effective person. So I really appreciate that. Secondly, Pat Kowal, who I also did not know, is really proved to be an extraordinary public lawyer, in terms of intelligence, in terms of process, in terms of sense of humor and irony about all of the stuff that goes on around this, and I really appreciate that. And thirdly, I want to speak specifically about Aaron Bloom, who I did know because we were adversaries in a litigation, but who really is a master of the very complicated and intricate laws governing campaign finance that we've been trying to navigate. I too, Carlo, have certain marginal differences between the campaign finance proposal we're going to vote on and what I would do if I had plenary authority, but they're very marginal at the numbers about contribution limits and what contributions we match. Overall, I think that we are striking a very appropriate balance and taking a very, very meaningful step towards the further evolution of the New York City campaign finance process and campaign finance system. We are cutting contribution limits by more than 50% out of a desire to see both the political community and the donor and business community relieved of the reputational issues that arise from the perception and sometimes the reality of large campaign contributions. There has been a perception of quid pro quo corruption in New York City government for a long time. There's been a reality to it in certain circumstances too. The vast majority of elected officials and candidates are honorable people. The vast majority of donors are honorable people, but they are besmirched by the occasional person who shows up giving large amounts of contributions, seeking to peddle influence, seeking to establish themselves in ways that are perceived as and are at times corrupting of New York City government. And we are taking a dramatic, large step in eliminating the potential and occasional reality of corruption. And I think that it's a very important step. At the same time, we're doing so consistent with First Amendment jurisprudence, even the First Amendment jurisprudence of this right-wing Supreme Court that is going to be in power for the next generation and is going to further change the laws in this area. But it's my view that we've got it right and that this is a defensible and appropriate step. The third thing that I think is very important to me, having represented campaigns in New York City for a long time and dealt with the Campaign Finance Board for a long time, is that we are not taking any step that is going to complicate their job or is going to reduce their incredibly demonstrated track record for administering this system, for sussing out and preventing, and in some cases referring for prosecution people who have tried to cheat the matching funds system. We are keeping it simple, clear, and accountable. And that's a very, very important thing. And we all need to continue to recognize the incredibly effective job that that agency does as a model, not only a model campaign finance organization, but really a model of nonpartisan, non-political public administration. Just the last point, overlooked in all this, I think, is that we are going to recommend a citywide system of participatory budgeting. I think that's a very significant step. One of my commissioners will say that I, at one point, listening to testimony about all this civic engagement stuff, was a little bit cynical about what it means. I do think that cynicism reflects idealism. You can't be a cynic if you're not an idealist. I think that participatory budgeting involving communities at the community level in deciding where capital funds go is very important. I'm eager to see the final language, and I hope that the mayor and future mayors will fully fund this, and this will become an institutionalized part of life in New York City.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to begin, as my fellow commissioners have, with thanking the chair and secretary, co-chair, and my fellow commissioners for the incredible work that they've done, and the staff of this Charter Revision Commission for the incredible work that they've done in preparing us to get to this point. I'm very with the process in which we've gone through in this short period of time that we were able to do the hearings, take testimony, and have all this information downloaded and processed for us into a document, which is this resolution, which I must say I support strongly. And if I had the time today and would be able to remain, unfortunately, because of conflict in my position in my organization, I cannot. I would be here to vote yes for it. You've heard from my fellow commissioners, there are concerns. Yes, there are many concerns about some of the resolutions that made it to, which will make it to the ballot box, but the fact that some will not doesn't mean that they disappear or die here. I think we've done a lot of incredible creative foundation going forward for future commissions and allow these very important issues like redistricting and redistricting and ranked choice to be a continued important discourse about how we advance our city democracy. I still remain confident that one, the city will get to a point where they'll address these issues and to the betterment of our city. But I'm concerned too about whether or not what the impacts of these particular issues will have both on communities of color and the most vulnerable of the city. And so I would agree with the analysis of our staff in this resolution that there's further work that needs to be done in drilling down on these issues.
Kyle, let me just interrupt you because I'd like your vote. If we can get Sharon to speak very briefly,
then I will cede so I can get my vote again. Thank you.
I will be brief, but I have a point of clarification, a suggestion, and one concern. So my point of clarification, and you don't have to answer this right now, I just want to understand on the term limits on community boards, the establishment of a four-term limit that becomes effective. I want to understand what that means for folks who have served then 2 or 3 terms. Does it become immediate, or does the 8 years start for them? My suggestion really is about some of the things that we've talked about in terms of things like how to explore ranked choice voting. And that is to collectively not let up on how we continue to drive the state on some of the issues that we were particularly interested, but recognized that there were limits to what we could do. And so I need to say that publicly, even things like ranked choice voting, if we want them to align with the state, then we have to continue to push the state. My concern, which comes in the form of a request, has to do with our need to be careful stewards of public resources. And I do feel like we need to do some additional homework on understanding what are the financial implications of what is being proposed. Specifically, I'd like to really understand what the dollars look like in terms of the Civic Engagement Commission, and what the financial implications are around some of the campaign finance reform changes.
I will, I know that Mendy has not spoken, but Mendy, we're going to take a vote and then have you speak, if that's possible. All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second, this is a motion to have a vote on the resolution. All right, did I hear? Or no second? All those in favor? Aye. All right, then I will, you do a count. Go ahead.
Yeah, so all those in favor?
Aye.
On the resolution.
Like to vote to move the resolution or to vote on the language in the resolution?
Move the language. We would accept the language and
Okay, all right. Can you do that?
can you do it again? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? One opposed. Is there any abstention? Everyone is voting yay. There is one nay and one abstention. Will the record reflect that? Kyle, thank you very much.
Again, my apologies, and thank you very much.
Excuse me. Mendy, your comments, I'd like to hear them.
Staff. The staff read all the work the staff put together. Matt, Aaron, Josh, Christy, you did a wonderful job flushing the issues. I don't want to be too repetitive. I think John just summed it up the best way. We're tackling very serious issues, and sometimes proper change requires further commissions in the future to tackle the questions raised over here. But the most important thing I credit the chairman was taking on those issues, the courage to take on the issues, have a dialogue. Our job is to start the process and do as much as we can. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the staff for helping me in the process be educated what we're facing in the city.
I just wanted to add one thing towards some of the commissioners who had particular language in here that that you would change. There is a provision in here, and that says that, you know, as in the drafting process, the chair can accept further tweaks with notice, and that was something that I took notice of in voting, and I think that to the extent that there are minor tweaks that to effectuate and address those concerns, that's included within the resolution we just voted favorably on.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I'd like to note for the record that there were 10 individuals who voted on behalf of this resolution. There was 1 vote against it and 1 vote abstention. 10-1-1 for the record. Is there anyone else that has any comment? That was easy. Let me thank all of you. You've done a terrific job. This has not been easy, and as many of you have said, we still were unable to reach consensus on a couple of things, and I'm sorry we had a negative and an abstention, but maybe over the next week or so until we have a final vote, we may get a total unanimous approval. Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Yes. Certainly can, certainly can. Yes. That's all right, you made it. Yes, good to see you.